Ready.
Okay, so we are officially live. Welcome everybody to our virtual speaker series. I'm Paul Gazzone, one of the assistant principals at Oceanside High School. My partner is Dr. Clifton Rogers, the principal at Oceanside Middle School. Today we have three guests with us today. We have Dr. Nina Weisenreiter. She's a school psychologist at Oceanside High School. We have Mr. Kevin Carbonetti. He's a school counselor at OHS and the lead counselor for the district. And we have Kathy Dunn, who is a school counselor at Oceanside Middle School. So, we had some teachers on last week, and we figured what a great way to look at education through a different lens than bring in some of our mental health providers to talk about the kind of work that they do, right? Because I think a lot of times when people think about K-12 schooling, they think about teachers and instructors, but there is another perspective and another avenue of which we serve students, and that's through like the mental health area. So why don't we just start off? Well, before we start off, I do want to bring awareness to today is Autism Awareness Day. So if you get a chance, make sure you go on your social media and post a positive message and help raise awareness and start a conversation about autism. So
I'm going to put my blue shirt on right now.
Okay, you can go for Dr. Rogers. But listen, we're all in our homes, in our offices. So we're going to refer to ourselves by first names, not by our formal titles. And we all know each other really well here. So why don't we start off first by hearing a little bit about each one of you, right? So Kevin, why don't you start off about talking about what you do as a school counselor and maybe focus on some of the things that might be a little bit different than what Kathy will talk about.
Yeah, sure. So I've been a school counselor now for about 11 years. So most of that has been in Oceanside. I did do a year of counseling at a private school at St. John the Baptist in West Islip. So there is a lot involved when it comes to school counseling. I think stereotypically, a lot of people just think that we do the college applications, we prepare schedules. And yeah, while that is definitely a big part of it, we do so much more in terms of running groups and checking in with, our students consistently, reaching out to parents, dealing with teachers and administrators in the building, reaching out to the community. So there really is a lot. I know that I've left a ton of stuff out, but if anything in a school, we're usually somehow involved.
And Kathy, what about at the middle level? Talk about what it is that you kind of do.
There are a lot of similarities, honestly, between the two levels. But I think in the middle level, we're dealing with a different stage in kids' lives and what their tasks are, what lies before them. I like our particular district. We have a great program where we are super involved with the kids. I used to be very jealous of teachers because they knew all the kids' names and the kids would say hi to them if they saw them somewhere outside of school. And I was like, I was the counselor. And you do a lot of things privately, which is important. But I love that idea when we started group guidance, being in the classrooms, getting to know every single student, getting to know their personalities. I say to them all the time, I have their files that tells me some things about them, but knowing them and seeing them interact with their peers and helping them problem solve and deal with conflict and all kinds of issues that might come up in a classroom, that is how I really get to know them. And so for me, that's been the best experience. And that's what I love about middle level.
And Anita, what about school psychology, right? Because that is a little different than what school counselors do. So kind of talk about what it is that you kind of do on a daily basis.
Sure. I work really closely with the school counselors in our building. I feel like we're a team. That's something I really enjoy. I work with Kevin a lot when we're supporting families and students. So I think there's some overlap and then some things that are different. What I like about my job as a school psychologist is this idea that we have one foot in education and then one foot in mental health. So a lot of what the school psychologists do in our school district has to do with special education. So some of it has to do, my favorite thing to do is counseling. So we do a lot of counseling for students who receive special education support with social emotional learning. And then we do lots of counseling with the students of our building, all the students of our building. And that's my favorite part of the job. And that's some of the overlap with the counselors. And then another part of our job is evaluations and doing things having to do with planning for special education needs of our students. And then I don't think it's necessarily different. I think our school counselors and our school psychologists and our social workers are all involved in supporting students who are struggling with social emotional difficulties. And sometimes, depending on the case, we're more involved in assisting with that. And in other times, the counselors are. But that's a big part of my job and my favorite part of the job.
One of the things that I don't think that either of you mentioned is how helpful you are not only to the students but to the staff. You know, I think what's different. I'm sorry, I have some noise in my house. Shh.
I couldn't hear her. Were you able to hear what she said?
I was saying how.
Hear Allison.
Can you hear me now, Kathy? Kathy's just tuned me out after a long 3 weeks. What I think
Can you hear
about the counselors and the psychologists is how much the staff depends on you.
There's no sound coming through.
Paul, do you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Yeah, so do I.
No, I can't hear her.
You've had enough of
Text
me.
her if she has any questions for me. For some reason, her audio is not coming through.
Okay. I just wanted to say that how much the staff depends on the counselors and the psychologists. Look, we look to you for guidance for meeting the kids' needs. And in times of crises, it makes, I think your role different than the teacher's role is the way that you work with the administrators to help the teachers to help meet the kids' needs.
I'm not getting her audio at all.
All right, I'll stop talking.
Okay, Allison might just have to stop talking then.
You can reiterate my message, Paul.
Allison was just saying that our PPS staff, which also includes social workers, not only do they support students, but they also help support our faculty and staff through difficult times, which is 100% accurate. So let's talk about the path to getting to where you guys are, right? So Kevin, talk about how did you get to be a school counselor? What is the journey? What is the path? What does that look like?
Yeah, so mine was an interesting one, and I know there are some students and some of my families that know this, but I did not start college, intending to be a school counselor. So I was actually a biology major on the pre-vet track. So I was very interested in science. I knew I wanted to work with people in some capacity. So I figured I'd do that more through, medicine, particularly with animals. When I wasn't happy there, I actually turned to some of the people that I considered, that I was close with, who taught me back in high school. And almost everyone kind of said, why don't you look at counseling? So I was fortunate that where I went to college, they actually had a counseling major. So I started there, fell in love with the classes immediately, explored a little bit, and kind of found my way into school counseling. So got a counseling degree undergrad, and then went to LIU post for my school counseling degree. And just loved interning at the middle school level and at the kindergarten level. I was at the high school level. So just kind of fell in love with it there.
So Kathy, Kevin mentioned interning. What does that look like for someone who's going through like an internship for school counseling?
It's, honestly, there are certain jobs you can learn a lot about them behind the scenes, but when you actually get into the job. So I know for me, I was very fortunate. I went to Queens College and they had a great program and they had wonderful internship opportunities. And I was able to actually work in a setting. One of them was actually more clinical and it was a counseling agency. The second setting was in a school and getting to kind of shadow someone who's already doing the job, seeing how they do it, how they go about what it is they do, and also discovering whether it really is something you want to do. I think that's important. So you got to see and live with basically someone who's doing the job. And I know we take interns in, and I really enjoy that part of my job as well. But it's like the on the ground, behind the scenes look. And I think it's super important.
Yeah, I think a common message that we've been hearing so far through all our guests has been this idea of taking advantage of experiential learning opportunities. Internships, externships, job shadowing. Because what we've heard is, it's important to get out there and see what the job is really like before you make your final decision and say, this is what I'm going to do. So I think that's a great point that keeps being brought up, and something that we should all really share with our students and our children. And Nina, what about you, right? So you're a school psychologist. What is that? How is the path similar and how is it different to becoming a school psychologist?
So I could get pretty long-winded about the story of how I arrived at becoming a school psychologist and a clinical psychologist. So you'll have to tell me to wrap it up if I go too long. When I applied undergrad to college, I applied to a college at Cornell called Human Ecology. And Human Ecology, that college inside of Cornell, has all different paths that have to do with public service and all kinds of unique applications of different professions to human ecology or to like human well-being. So I hadn't decided on my major. Truly, I didn't decide to go to graduate school for psychology until this summer before my senior year of college. So I took a number of different classes and I majored in something called Human Development and Family Studies. But I took courses exploring economics, marketing, law, a lot of different classes before I arrived at psychology. And a lot of my courses had to do with partnering with the community up in Ithaca. And I started to take a lot of classes that had to do with education as a tool to empower people. So that was like a big influence for me. And then towards the end of college, I took an internship one summer at an advertising firm in Manhattan. And I really did not see myself going on that path. And I think that was one of my most valuable internship experiences, was the internship experience at an advertising firm, because I knew that that wasn't the path I wanted. And then I pursued graduate school. And when I was pursuing programs for graduate school, I was looking into programs that were specifically for school psychology because of my love of education as an empowerment tool. But when I was narrowing down the graduate programs, I knew I wanted to come back to Long Island, where I grew up. And Hofstra at the time had a program that was a clinical and school psych combined PhD program. So I was really lucky because I kind of chose Hofstra because it would allow me to come back home to Long Island. But I'm so glad that I did, because I ended up getting a PhD in clinical psychology and school psychology. And I'm so glad that I did that because I love my other career as a clinical psychologist. And I think it helps me a lot in my position as a school psychologist at the high school.
Oh, that's great.
Nina, you're not the first person that we've met over the past couple of weeks that has said they're really grateful for internships that didn't go well. People have learned a lot about themselves and what type of careers they want to ultimately have for the rest of their lives based on internships like that weren't. So it's important to recognize the value in that. Like you said, it was a very important internship because it got you where you are today. Sometimes I think people are afraid. They think once they've committed to an internship or a program that this is the direction they need to go in. So I think it's important for the students to hear that if they didn't love something, it's okay to go in a different direction. That's part of the reason we do these internship type activities.
Absolutely. It was one of the most valuable learning experiences that I can think of professionally.
Thank you. Well, can we give a shout out to the other counselors? I see Miss Daly's there and Miss Broderick, and they're saying they're loving and missing their group guidance students.
Then I'm also going to give some shout outs if you're going to be sneaking in some. So I'm going to give some shout outs to Miss Stekla, one of our school counselors. Miss Cilio's here, our school counselor. And you know our main man, Joe, right? Our main man, Joseph Capone. He shows up every session. Joe, thanks for being here. Herb, you're also, you're here quite often. Mr. Uchek, you're here. And so is our Board of Education member, Seth Blau. Thanks for showing up, everybody. So let's talk about what you guys find interesting, right? What's the most interesting or inspiring part of your job? When you wake up, you're like, oh, you know what? Today I get to do this. I can't wait. Whoever wants to take it first. God.
I'll just say that part of my job, I feel like it's creative because it's different every single day. I tell the students all the time that I never know what the day is going to bring me. I think I have a plan, and the plan doesn't always happen. But I like that. I like that, being able to be spontaneous, think on your feet, and I look forward to that. I think it makes the job very creative, exciting, and fun. And I like the idea of just being there for the kids, and the fact that they know we're there, and it's super important, especially at that point in their development. But I love that about my job.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. That you always got to be, there's always something going on, and you could have all these plans prepared and then something happens and you don't get any of that done, so I do love that piece of it also. I just love being able to create relationships with my students and their families also, and just really, like Kathy said, being able to support them through this journey and help them, guide them towards making decisions with what they want to do after college, what courses they want to take. And it's just, I love that human interaction.
I think one of the things that I love the most about my job, and something that I feel like is very humbling, is when students and families let us into their lives and maybe sometimes share really personal information that's important for us to know, so that we can be in their corner and encourage them and support them as they're deciding on their path for the future. I love working in a high school because our students are young adults with opinions and dreams, and I just love when they open up their lives and their thoughts to us, so that we can kind of be in their corner and cheer them on or support them as they find their way. I think that's like very humbling and exciting when they take us along on their journey.
That's great. And on the flip side, what do you guys find to be the most difficult part of your job, right? Because every career, every profession has an inspiring part, a great part, but every career also has like a really difficult aspect of it, right? So for you guys, what do you find to be some of the more difficult things that you have to work through?
I think sometimes it's the fact that you bring your work home with you. You don't stop caring about your kids when that bell rings at the end of the school day. And I feel I love the fact I have those connections, but that is the hard part. You bring it home with you, you think about it, you'll lose sleep over some kids and what's going on in their lives. But ultimately, you're still very, very happy that you're there for someone, regardless of what they're going through. But that is difficult.
I agree with Kathy about that part, that is something that has taken my whole career to learn how to cope and manage that idea that your mind doesn't shut off because we're dealing with people we really care about. I think another part that whenever I speak with at our career forum at school, or when I go into classrooms to talk about my profession, I think something that's important for people to know who are considering becoming school psychologists is that there is a lot of paperwork and work that has to get done. And I think a difficult part of the job, and I've spoken to a number of school psychologists over the years, is finding a balance, because all of that paperwork is pretty tedious and detail oriented, and it has to get done. And it's hard to balance because I'm never going to turn away, people at my door who want help in order to get the paperwork done. So time management to always find the time to do that kind of work, but we only have a certain number of hours in the day when we can be available to kids and parents. So I think that's a difficult thing to find a balance, because that's important work too. Doing evaluations and writing documents is a very important way to support our students as well. But finding a balance to fit it all in is sometimes difficult.
So I'm not making this up. I was originally going to say bringing work home, and then when Kathy said that, I said I could go the paperwork route. The nerd in me likes the paperwork, but yeah, you guys kind of hit on everything.
Good. So think back to when you guys were in school, middle school. Before we get there, I want to talk about skills, because you actually, you brought up time management and stuff like that, and I kind of want to touch on that. Skills. What skills are important for students to have that are interested in pursuing a career in mental health, whether it be in a school or outside of school? What type of skills is it important to develop and strengthen and then hone in on?
That's a long one. It's interesting. When I I interviewed at Oceanside. I had taken a few years off between my undergrad and when I went back for a master's, not really knowing if I wanted to keep going with psychology. And I was a professional baker for a while. And I remember being almost embarrassed when I was sitting in an interview for a counseling position, even though I had some great internships and great work experience. But what I remember the superintendent saying to me is there was a transfer of skills. So I'm trying to remember those things that he said were important. So I think organizational skills, you do have to have good paperwork. You have to keep track of your kids, and it matters to them. Some of the skills that I know I've developed and have worked on, you need, of course, be a very good interpersonal intelligence is important. Being able to listen, being a really good listener. But I feel like sometimes we're also troubleshooters, problem solvers, trying to think on your feet really fast sometimes in a situation. What might come in handy? What could help here? How can I help the situation get better? So that's kind of what made me think of that when you said that.
Yeah, I was going to say definitely having the ability to listen, I think, is incredibly important, because there are times, I think, when people are talking to us and in our heads, we're trying to figure out, how are we going to respond? What's the best way to respond to this? And it's really important to not do that and really pay attention and be present and listen to what that person is saying. And it's a lot of practice, and it's something that I think I'm still practicing, but the listening is definitely important. And you need to know how to read a situation too. And kind of like troubleshooting, like you said, Kathy, the ability to really kind of think on your toes. You're not going to be able to address a situation the same way every single time, depending on who's involved or what's going on. And, you definitely need to be able to read situations also.
You concur, Nina? Think something different?
No, yeah, I absolutely agree with what Kathy and Kevin were saying. And, I was listening, using my listening skills to listen to you while balancing it with thinking about anything else. And I think in our profession, just like any profession, I think there's certain parts of maybe your personality or your temperament or characteristics about yourself that might draw you to a certain field for a career. And then I know I speak with students often about some hesitance or concern, like I wouldn't know how to do that, like counseling or how to handle that situation. And just like any other job, there's a lot of on-the-job training or things that you learn during your internship in terms of skills and things like that. I think something that's important as a characteristic for a person who goes into school counseling or counseling is that desire to continue to learn and develop your skills, because there's always research coming out about new best practice and things like that. So I think you have to have I think it's good to have a love of learning and to keep an open mind to learning new skills or new perspectives in supporting people and helping them with mental health and social emotional well-being and things like that.
So Alice and I and our viewers have been pretty lucky, because we've had now, I don't know, like 12, 13 different professional careers on the show. And it's interesting now because we get to see a pattern of responses when we ask similar questions. And something that keeps rising to the top is the idea of active listening and how important that is. And, I also believe that it's an important skill, but I think prior to this experience, I don't know if I think I would have ever said, listening is a top skill that's necessary to be successful. But, after being part of this experience over the last 3 weeks, it's really kind of shined some light on that skill set. I mean, often people are saying active listening is very important. And that's something to think about, because I don't know how often we talk about listening skills as being a top skill that we need to develop in relation to other things. Do we say it's important? Yes, we do. But do we say it's more important than being able to prioritize? I don't know if we do that. But just through this experience, that's one takeaway that I can say that I'm bringing with me whenever this show wraps up, probably around next week. So let's talk about middle school or in high school when you guys were in school. So what were some experiences that you took advantage of that helped you know and understand that this career potentially is the one for you?
I'm going to say coursework. My mom always used to say every semester, even in college, take something just for fun. maybe something you weren't planning on doing just as an exploration. And it paid off big time for me. I remember signing up for a psychology class, and the rest was history. Like, I fell in love and I wanted to know more. Did the same thing all through college and didn't even declare a major till I was near the end. And the person who called me and saying, well, what's your major? And they said, took a lot of psychology classes, evolutionary psychology, all kinds of great stuff, maybe. And you did very well. And like, you know what? I do like that stuff. So I think just keep exploring and trying on new things.
Kevin, did you want to go next to you?
Yeah, so in high school, like I said, I really like the interactive piece of what we do, and being involved in communities. And I took advantage of a lot of extracurricular activities in high school, a lot of community service things, just a variety of different groups, everything, honestly. So I knew, again, I just loved that interactive piece. I wanted to be with people. I wanted to work with people, and that definitely helped me out.
I think I was a part of like a peer counseling organization in high school. And I think that that probably continued to foster my desire to be in a helping profession like that. I also was involved in Camp Anchor. I was a volunteer at Camp Anchor all the years of high school. So we have lots of students in Oceanside who volunteer or get counseling jobs at Camp Anchor. I think that was a really key experience in my high school time, because I think I knew I wanted to do something in education and in the helping field. So I think that was a big piece in forming what I maybe wanted to do in the future. And I think the last thing was just, I don't think that we had a lot of elective classes having to do with psychology and things like that in high school, but I do think that the courses that I chose in high school and some of the sports that I was involved in high school really continued to encourage my development of persistence. And I think that's was a really key component of my high school career, like that idea of teaching grit and persistence and believing in yourself and what you can accomplish. I think that was a big part of my high school career.
I think just going outside your comfort zone. And you really grow. That's where you grow. You have to try new things. I'm thinking also clubs and activities I got involved in. Same thing. You have to go outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think we're all of us right now are kind of in that situation, given our circumstances, right? I mean, we'd all prefer to be walking the halls of our buildings and, in our classrooms and in our offices and and our students opening their Chromebooks or logging onto their iPads with their teachers there and in the cafeteria and in the gym, right? So I think right now is kind of a time for us to take advantage of an opportunity. Look at this as an opportunity to go outside our comfort zone and do things that are different, right? And maybe that means if you're a student, or I'm going to use the term learner because I think we're all learners, right? Students, adults, we're all learners. So maybe it's, I don't know how to do something rather than relying on somebody. Maybe it's going to YouTube and say, hey, I need to try to figure something out. I'm going to go on my own and try to figure out how to do that. I think that's a great point that you guys brought up. Now, and you also brought up persistence. So something that we haven't asked other guests has been the idea of applying for jobs, right? So jobs in the mental health area for schools are very competitive, right? It's very difficult to attain a position. And, quite often for a newer applicant, you're going to get a lot of no's. So, what kind of advice do you have for someone, and maybe it's not only for those people, those prospective candidates that are applying for a job in the area of mental health, but just in general, right? It's a really, the economy's down right now. Who knows what will be in 5 years, but how do you recommend people deal with the notion of, I'm not getting calls, I'm not getting interviews, because that might happen as they try to enter this field as it is competitive. And maybe how do they separate themselves too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when we talk with high school students about what they would like to have as their ideal career, I like to talk to students about my path and other of my friends and family's path, because I think sometimes it's about considering that there might be many steps along the way to your ideal career or the career that you end up deciding to have. So I think especially jobs in school counseling where there aren't that many positions in a district. I think the idea of keeping an open mind to maybe not the end goal job and career that you wish to have, but all of the other opportunities that might come up along the way. So I know when I was in graduate school, it was a long time. It was like 5.5, nearly 6 years of graduate school. And so when I was finishing up some of the clinical psychology pieces, I did some per diem, like day by day work in certain school districts doing evaluations, and had a lot of different opportunities that then helped to build my resume and then helped me when I was ready to apply for a full-time position later on. So kind of not turning away from or rejecting the potential for jobs that aren't exactly what you wanted, because you might learn a lot along the way.
Yeah, it's skill set development. I mean, I've got 3 adult grown children, and I've sat with all of them when they sat and tried to write that first resume for their first big job interview. And I think what became apparent was all those experiences. Even if you're babysitting, what skills are you picking up? What are you learning? How can you turn that to your advantage? And it's time management, and you're learning how to direct people. And there's a lot of transferable skills. So you don't be shy also about trying something, even if it's not in that direct path. You can still pick up and learn from that and then build on that as you move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to add, be persistent, throughout that process. Just because you don't necessarily get something doesn't mean that you failed. Right. There is something to be picked up as you go through the process, whether the interview experience or, tweaking that cover letter. It's just doing it over and over and over again. That's how you better yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great advice all the way around, and advice that everyone should follow for those of you who are looking to apply for a new position. So we're getting ready to wrap up. Are there any final comments or anything you want to share with our viewers? Recommendations, anything?
I would just like to offer that any of the students who might be watching who are students at Oceanside High School can definitely feel free to stop down in the guidance office and ask somebody to point them in the direction of my office if they have questions about the career of school psychology or clinical psychology. That's one of my favorite things to do when I see somebody's name pop up on my calendar. And then when they come in and they say, "Oh, I just wanted to ask you some questions about your job." That's a fun part of working in a high school. So I invite any students to do that.
Yes, we never mind it. It's great. And I think if that's something that's in someone's heart and they're thinking this is what they want to pursue, it's a very worthwhile conversation to have with any of us. Please hit us up.
Yep.
Paul, I think it's a good time also just to mention how fortunate we are to be part of a school community that places such a high value on mental health and the availability of mental health resources for our students. It's, the group guidance program at the middle school is a hallmark program and something very unique. And Kathy and Bob Helmrich and Dee Broderick and Ro Daly, they have presented locally at the state and even at the national level on our group guidance program. And people are always interested in learning more about it. Social workers at the elementary school, and now students receiving some health education at the elementary school taught by a certified school counselor. Social workers, of course, at the middle and the high school, and then, having the psychologists available at both the high school and the middle level, not just like Nina said, to provide, counseling or mandated counseling, just being there as a resource to the students, to the staff, being available. I think we've taught kids at a very young age in Oceanside that their mental health is a priority. There's no taboo, and that knowing how to access those resources is one of the most important skills we could teach our students so that they could live healthy and productive lives. So I'm super proud to be part of a school district that holds mental health, make it such a priority, a high priority for our students. So, and you guys do an amazing job, and I'm slightly biased, but I think you guys are.
I couldn't agree more, Allison. I couldn't agree more. I think, there's two parts of learning, and one is, the academic skill development, and the other piece is the social emotional learning piece. And at the front lines of the social emotional learning piece is our school counselors, our psychologists, and our social workers. So thank you guys for doing what you do, especially during our difficult times. It's people like you that kind of keep the machine going. So did any of you want to share a final comment before we wrap up, or are we good? Up to you, tell me.
No, thank you for organizing this, Dr. Gazone, Dr. Glickman. Thank you. This is great. And I can't wait to get back.
Yeah.
We won't miss you guys.
Same. And Kathy,
Yeah.
your baking skills have come in very, very important. They've come in very handy in your role as school counselor. A meeting wouldn't be the same.
All right. So tomorrow we have Glenn Myers, who is an aerospace mechanical engineer. He's worked on airplanes, other aircrafts, and even a space shuttle, which is really interesting. And then on Monday, we have Michael White, who is a member of the New York City Carpenters Union. And on Wednesday, we have Susan Spindell, who works in fashion merchandising. And Tuesday, we're still ironing out who's going to be coming on that day. So Dr. Glickman and I will be talking soon. And don't forget, today is Autism Awareness Day. So if you have time, get on social media, share a post, raise some awareness, start a conversation, and have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.